What's up guys and welcome back to On the Brick with another episode of On the Mock. This week we have an episode that the members of my Discord server have definitely seen coming. All of the builds in this week's video come from one designer, and this is nowhere near everything they have submitted. This has been way long overdue, but today we are going to be looking at 5 builds from the designer Ivy or Bit. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because I have actually shown off some of his stuff before. I think he was even in the first episode. But anyway, there's so much to talk about here, so let's just get into this. First up is this armored assault tank and defibrillator. That is such a hard word for me to say. The normal tan version has 585 parts, the separatist version 570, and the defibrillator has 805, and it took him about 6 hours to design everything. He does also mention that some of this isn't actually buildable in real life just because of the lack of colors in certain pieces, like the curved pieces on top of this thing. I'm not saying the name again. The builds not always being actually buildable in real life is an ongoing theme with Ivy, but I don't really hold that against him or anything because these are still really good designs. And usually it's just colors that need to be changed out. So like if you wanted to make one of these but say a little war-torn or something, you could easily do that with some color changes. And overall, I think this is a pretty decent build. Getting the curve on the bottom is very difficult to do. Even Brickvault kind of cheat on their versions for lack of a better term, but I think this is some really good work. Next up is the ATRT. Now, I have shown off ATRTs from him before, but these are slightly different than those and they have different colors, so it counts as a different build to me. There are 93 parts in these builds and they can sit a minifig, and unfortunately they are not fully buildable as some of these sloped pieces on the legs just aren't available in the colors asked for. Again, simple recoloring though, and you should be able to build this. I have said many times, because a lot of these have been submitted, that ATRTs are some of the most designed mocks that I have personally seen and at least have been submitted for this series. These ones have a bit going on in the back, no pun intended, and if you ever redesign these, I would consider slimming it down back there as the actual models are pretty slim, but it is also really hard to work in this scale. I've actually built Brickvault's ATRTs, which the video for that will be coming out really soon, and I know it's really hard to build something this small and this delicate. But one thing I did want to point out here is that you'll notice Bit or Ivy, I don't really know which one he prefers, never misses a detail. For instance, there are like the handlebars here on these ATRTs for the drivers to use. Staying with the Republic, this next build is his Bark Speeder, and it has 66 pieces for the main build, 68 for the stretcher, and 110 for the one with the side pod. All of these are actually fully buildable, and it took him about 4 hours to design all of them. And just in case I forget to mention it, all of the builds today are minifig scale. Bark Speeders are another one of the builds that I have seen a bunch of people take on, and this is an interesting version as well. If you've watched my channel for a while now, or if you were around from like the beginning, then you know that I have a self-proclaimed most accurate Bark Speeder ever out there. I still hold true to that. But these are also really good, and they use some less rare pieces. I also like how he uses the bar to actually cover that whole gap thing at the front of the speeder, and even elevates it off the ground a little bit using some clever clear pieces. You know, this is one that I've never really understood why LEGO makes so big. It doesn't need to be, it works at a smaller scale and it's more accurate. So I really like seeing people make these smaller, sometimes more accurate builds. And speaking of smaller builds, and don't worry, we are going to get to some really big ones, here is his STAP or STAP, which contains 35 pieces and took a surprising 2 hours to design. Sometimes these smaller builds are the most difficult to make. Again, it's an interesting challenge to figure out how to get the actual shape of what you're designing in such a small amount of pieces while trying to keep it relatively sturdy and hopefully also actually making it buildable. Obviously, this isn't, again, because of colors, like the T-pins on the bottom don't come in reddish brown as far as I'm aware. But again, switching those out to like light bluish gray or something wouldn't make too much of a difference. In the blue version, which I almost called the 501st version, you do see that it actually does come with like the clear stand as well, so you can make it look like it's flying around. And I personally love the inclusion of the backpack on the back of the droid. Another simple build, but one definitely worth looking at. You know that arc in the Clone Wars with Pong Krell, and they go to that planet, and it's one of like everyone's favorites? Do you think the name of that planet was meant to just be Umbaran, but when they asked what it was, the guy was like, Umbaran? And they went, oh, okay, Umbaran. And anyway, here is the Umbaran starfighter that's also minifig scale. This is definitely the biggest that we've seen so far at 1,420 pieces, and it took 7 hours to make, and I can actually confirm that this is buildable in real life. In fact, you can buy this on my web store if you want. It is a little expensive just because some of the pieces are a little more rare. I do like the overall design of this one, but there are some gaps that I wish were filled in, and I know it's a little hard to do that though. And I also am a little worried about these wing connections, specifically at the top there. I don't know how strong they actually are, but if any of you want to figure that out, I'd certainly appreciate it. Point being, I do love how smooth this build is, and it makes me want to go and watch that arc again, even though I know I won't because I just cannot stand Pong Krell. But I have saved the best for last here because this is probably the biggest model that he has made. This is his Minifig-scale Sandcrawler. It took 11 days and about 60 hours of work, contains around 14,000 pieces, and is fully buildable. Again, if you switch out some colors of some pieces. This also does include a small bantha and a Zephyr G swoop bite. Yeah, this is quite the model, and I love how he includes, you know, both versions from like A New Hope, and we also see the Mandalorian. Like, you get all your droids down there, but he's also in the back fighting off Jawas. And it really helps show just how big this thing actually is. Also, why is that rope going through the pieces? I just noticed that. The Sandcrawler is a massive beast, and again, he made sure to get all the details in here. I love the variation of the colors, I love the greebling on here, and I can't imagine how hard or how time consuming it was just to put the actual treads on the wheel properly. I have to be honest and say the front of this is a little wonky, and to no surprise, getting all of these angles to meet at just the right way is a little hard to do, and by a little hard, I mean a lot hard. And if you were wondering, there is actually a little bit of an interior here. Ivy actually showcased the progress he made every single day over the 11 days it took to put this together, so you can see the internal structure, some of the interior, all of that. I don't know how well this would hold together in real life. These outer wall plates do seem to need a little more support than they have, and I'm really just basing that off the fact that BrickVault's version has a ton of support, but this isn't BrickVault's version, it's his own. So buildable or not, I don't really know. The fact that he even took the time to sit down and do this, especially over the course of like 11 days like he said, is tremendous and should be applauded. This is a lot of work to sit down and figure out, and I'm sure if he took the time to look over this again and say it took like a month to try to perfect this, we would have an incredible build. And I'm not saying this isn't, in fact, quite the opposite. I'm just trying to say, like, imagine how good of a build it could be if he was like specifically dedicated to it for a full month. Point being, this guy has a ton of tremendous things to see, and you should definitely check him out. In fact, let me and him know what your favorite model of his this week was in the comments down below. I always really appreciate seeing them. Also, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my Patreon. Here's the part that a lot of you are going to miss. Oh wait, really quick, thank you Jonathan and Project Elements. Okay, here's the part that some of you are gonna miss. ONTHEMOC is going to change. I'm not gonna say how yet, and I'm not really gonna say when. I will say that it's probably gonna change in September, but it is gonna change. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.